a word from our sponsor. So let's talk about the holidays and divorce. It is a super stressful time for families, especially when alcohol is involved. And our friends over at SoberLink want to help. SoberLink has teamed up with divorce and family law experts to provide information that you didn't know that could provide peace of mind during the holidays. So for those who still haven't heard about SoberLink, it is the solution for you if you're going through a divorce and custody case involving alcohol. Whether you are falsely accused of alcohol use or are concerned about your child's safety because of the other parent's alcohol use, SoberLink can help. SoberLink works hard to keep children safe, offering a remote alcohol monitoring system that is the gold standard because of its incredible technology. Don't miss out on SoberLink's free guide for the upcoming holiday season. You can request it right now at www.soberlink.com/DSG. That's me, the Divorce Survival Guide. So soberlink.com/DSG.
Welcome to the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, where we have open and honest conversations about co-parenting, separation, divorce, and the hardest question of all, should you stay or should you go? I'm Kate Anthony, your Divorce Survival Guide, and I'm here to help you navigate some of the roughest waters you've ever swum in and answer some of your toughest questions. I've been to hell and back, and now it's my mission in life to help you get to the other side of this process with your sanity and your heart intact.
Hey everyone, Happy New Year! It's almost here, 2023. How are you going to make it great? I guess that's always the question on the table, but for you guys, I think it's kind of a deeper question, right? If you have been contemplating divorce, if you have been questioning the state of your marriage for as long as most of us do, usually this is a time when the question looms even larger. There is a reason that January is considered divorce month. So if you are there and you are having all of these questions, first of all, you are not alone. And secondly, I hope that you take advantage of all that I have to offer with my programs. Grit and Grace, y'all, it's the bomb. I just want to let you know that I am taking private clients, and we'll put a link in the show notes to the page for private work. I know that a lot of you feel like, you want one-on-one attention, and I totally get that. I am taking on a very select handful of private clients in the new year. But I also want to let you know that Grit and Grace, I don't think there's anybody in Grit and Grace who would say that they don't get private attention. Because on our calls, really everybody has gotten a tremendous amount of personalized attention from me and with the feedback from the group. And really the community aspect, as I always say, the community aspect is the most wonderful part of this program. Probably the greatest thing in this program are the women who are in it. I mean, then there's me, but they're truly gorgeous. And I would love for you to join us. But again, if you feel like personalized attention is what you need, then please head on over to my website, kateanthony.com/private-coaching. And again, the link will be in the show notes, and you can check out the options that I have available. Speaking of divorce month, my guest today is Dawn Dais, and she is a freelance writer and a designer. And her previous books include The Shit No One Tells You, The Shit No One Tells You About Pregnancy, The Shit No One Tells You About Toddlers, and The Shit No One Tells You About Baby Number 2, and The Non-Runner's Marathon Guide for Women. All were published by Seal Press and have topped Amazon.com bestseller lists and have been featured by countless TV and print media sources. Her uniquely sarcastic yet inspiring tone has entertained and guided an enthusiastic core of readers towards their various ridiculous parenting and athletic goals. And her most recent book, The Shit No One Tells You About Divorce, is going to be released in January of 2023. And I love this book, you guys. I really do. It is tongue-in-cheek. Her writing style is really accessible and fun. It's a great book, and this is a great conversation. So you can pre-order the book or just get it in a probably a few short days everywhere that you can get them, that you get books. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Dawn Dais. Dawn, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your new book, which I'm super excited about. This is The Shit No One Tells You About Divorce.
Thank you for having me.
Shit No One Tells You About Divorce, a guide to breaking up, falling apart, and putting yourself back together. So you sort of run the gamut from start to finish almost.
Yeah, that when we were first coming up with the title and the subtitle for a while, the subhead was someone else came up with the guide to, what was it, breaking up without falling apart. And I was like, yeah, that's not an option. So we're going to need to like change that. So, yeah, right. I'm like, I think that's a huge part of it is the falling apart. Right. And if you're not allowing yourself that, then it's going to happen eventually. So might as well lean into it at some point.
So true. So true. I'm going to get to that. The falling apart part. You talk about the 7 stages of divorce, and I'll get to that in a second. But I want to start off, like in the introduction, you talk about how so many people say, like, it's going to be okay. You guys are going to get through this. Everything's going to be great. And you're like, awesome. What the fuck do I do now? Right. And you call it in the meantime. Yeah. And that's really what this book is for, right?
Yeah. I had a few friends that were a little bit ahead of me on their divorce timelines, a couple of years out, some even 5 years out. And I was just sort of spinning, and they were like, it's going to be fine. You guys are going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. And I'm like, I know that logically, but like, what the fuck am I supposed to do in this meantime? Because I think, you know that it's going to be okay, but the meantime is kind of that time between when everything blows up and when you get to a point in your life where it's no longer like this new thing, it just is life. It's just your life now, and it's calm, and there's no like chaos and vitriol. It's just you've sort of settled into this new version of you, and you're happy with it, and you're content. And there's nothing that there's no guarantee as to when that happens. And I think I was always kind of looking. It's kind of like when I had a new baby, where I'd be looking at like what happens at age 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. And I would just get so upset when they wouldn't hit those milestones. So I was just kind of the same thing with divorce. I was looking for somebody to tell me, when is this shit going to get easier? When is it going to stop feeling like this? And there really was no answer to that.
Yeah. Because, I mean, first of all, everybody's process is completely different.
Yeah.
That experience of like, okay, everything's okay. It's like, that can take years.
Yes. Yes.
Nobody tells you how long this process is going to take. And it's kind of shitty. Like, sorry, guys, but that's the deal.
I know it's hard because I've had a lot of people reach out to me since finding out that I wrote this book. And now all of a sudden I've become some sort of expert, which I think is hilarious. Because essentially I'm an expert in failure, right? Like I failed at marriage. So yeah, give me a call. I'll definitely guide you along this path. But I'm far enough removed now that I can tell them it's going to be okay in the same way everyone else told me it was going to be okay. But I try not to sugarcoat what they're going to go through. Like it's going to be very, very hard, because a lot of people, they'll ask for advice before they leave, kind of like what you deal with. And it's like, should I stay or should I go sort of thing. And I think I did this where I saw the divorce or the leaving as like a finish line. And so you kind of, especially if you're in a divorce with kids, like sometimes you wait a really long time to finally get out. And you just think, okay, when I finally leave, everything's going to be fine. And then it's not fine. And you just don't have the like reserves to deal with the emotional impact of okay, I have to now rebuild everything. And you're already exhausted from these years of this thing dying. So I try to warn people of that. Like, even if you get to the end and you actually pull the trigger, you're going to have a very long road after that. But it's okay, because at the end, like, you're going to be a better version of yourself. Everything's going to be better than it is now, but it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And it's hard to tell people that.
It is, but I think it's important too, right? Because we're just managing people's expectations here, right? We're giving it to you straight, but we're also managing your expectations, right? I know that I had that too. Like, when I got out, I went straight to, you talk about one of your stages. I went straight to like, woohoo, I'm out, I'm free. And then, like, a few months or a year later, I was like, face first in the dirt.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, wait, nobody told me about this. Like, I thought I was trying to skip things, right?
Yeah. You just want to jump over the hard part. Yeah. And especially if you initiate it, I think there is something people think, oh, the one who initiates it, there's nothing for them to heal from, or there's nothing for them to process because they're the one that called the time of death. But it's like, I think I thought that too. I was just, okay, I'm finally out of this thing that was not great. And then I had a whole healing process to just sort of find myself again and rebuild. And I wasn't expecting that. Yeah. So, and it's important. It's important to do. You cannot skip over that. And I feel like some people, like, they jump right into relationships and stuff. And I think it does catch up with you eventually, because you have to process it eventually, and it's going to happen.
That's right. I see it all the time. It happened to me too, where I got like right into this like wonderful relationship with this wonderful man. He was so amazing. He was so loving and kind and gentle and sweet. And, we had this connection and blah, blah, blah. But like 3 months in, I was like, I was like in bed with him, and I would have dreams about my ex. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? And they would start to surface in my dreams. And then finally it was like, they was surfacing in life. And there was this grief taking hold of me that I was like, what is happening? And I had to end this relationship with this person who was quite wonderful, but I was not there.
Yeah. I had a similar experience, and it was about 3 months in when I was like, and that's when I got into therapy, because I was like, oh, I have some stuff to deal with. And it wasn't that the same things were happening in that relationship that happened in my previous one. It was, I wasn't comfortable with the vulnerability required. I wasn't ready. And you really want to be ready, because it feels so good to feel good, but you're like, oh no, I'm not of any use to this human. Like, I really need to go get my shit together so I can be of value to someone. Yeah.
And then there are all the other really shitty choices, right? Like, there was that one guy who was really wonderful, and then there were all the other ones that were just absolutely dreadful. I mean, not dreadful, but like just not good choices. Not good choices. So in your book, you talk about the 7 stages of divorce. And so I just want to go through a couple of them. You said the first one is denial.
Yes. One of the first therapists I talked to said that it was divorce is going to be a grief process. And that didn't really connect with me, because at that point, like you, I was definitely not grieving. But then I realized, there definitely are stages. And I probably, when she told me that, I was heavy in the denial stage, actually.
Right.
There's a lot of different ways you can go in the denial, right? You can deny, a lot of people deny that it's even happening. And then, the person moves out and they're still in denial that it's actually going to lead to divorce. Oh, we're just taking some time.
Yes, I see that all the time. I do talk about this denial as being the first stage, especially when you end it, when you're the person who ends it. Like, expect the other person to be in complete denial for as long as possible.
Yeah. And then when you're the one that ends it, I think there's a denial of how many more stages you're going to have. Like I said, you get to that end and you just think, I am free. And it just doesn't play out like that. There's just a lot of other things that you're having to process. For me, a big part of it that was actually grief was losing my kids 50% of the time.
Sure.
And I don't think I really understood that for a year or two. Because a lot of what I went through was the loss of them and not having them 100% of the time. It wasn't so much the loss of my ex, but it was, I love those babies, and I stayed as long as I did because I couldn't bear the thought of not being with them every single day. Yeah. And so that hit me really hard. And I think I was in denial about how hard that was hitting me. So, denial is just, it's big. It's big at the beginning.
It is. It's very true. So then you said the second stage is Glee/booze.
Yeah. I said this one, it sometimes, depends on who instigated the divorce. But for me, there was a lot of exuberance. And I know for other people that exuberance and booze is brought by their friends who are like, screw that guy. Let's have some champagne. You're better off without him, type of thing. And so sometimes it's fake it till you make it. Glee,
sure.
Oh no, wait, I didn't like him anyway. Blah blah blah. I'm glad she left. Or it's still heavily leaning into the denial stage, because it's just everything's fine, everything's great. This is so much better. Da 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 da. It's a lot of dancing around and celebrating something that ultimately is going to be one of your biggest heartbreaks of life. Yeah. But, it's the beginning of things. So we have some champagne.
I definitely was in that. I was in the Glee booze stage. Well, the booze lasted a good 10 years till I had to stop that. But that for me, that was denial. The booze was denial because it was masking and covering how much grief I had to process and how much healing I had to do. So that was like a whole other thing. But I always recommend everyone go easy on the booze in the beginning. It's really easy to want to drink a lot because it's really helpful in numbing what you're feeling. But it's also numbing what you're feeling is not very helpful.
Yeah. And booze, that's a whole other conversation with the way booze has sort of been integrated into the experience of being a mom and being a
mommy
partner.
Culture, mommy wine culture.
Yeah,
yep, 100%.
It's not really my thing, but it's interesting to watch people and the way they use booze in different coping mechanisms, I guess, just for life, not necessarily even divorce or anything, but just life and kids and everything. Yeah, that's a whole other thing.
It is a whole other thing, but it's very true. And I say that as a sober person. It's a whole other thing. So, okay. So the next stage is the blame game.
Yeah, this one can last a really long time. Some people never get out of this one, actually. It's really easy at the end and for years after the end to just say everything was the other person's fault. I think whenever I talk to people about their divorce and their healing, I always say there's got to come to a point when you take ownership for whatever part you played. And there's always something that you can own up to. And it's not so much to like beat yourself up, but if you're going to get anything out of this experience and be better going forward, it can't just be, the lesson can't just be, don't marry an asshole, like that can't be it. You have to look at the role you played in things. But that takes a while. It takes a while to get to a point where you want to or willing to. So there's a very long stage of my ex did everything wrong and I am perfect. And let's just let that be the narrative. And if you don't have kids, that really can be the narrative because you never have to see this person again. That could just be the story, right?
Right.
But I think the most difficult thing for me is, we have to split up and then we had kids together. So you can't just maintain whatever storyline you had going because it didn't work, right? You guys weren't able to make it work and you still have to do this amazingly difficult, important project together. And so you can't just be pointing fingers at each other for the next 20 years. It's not going to work. Yeah. But the blame game is definitely a huge step at the beginning, a huge stage at the beginning that I highly recommend trying to move through as quickly as you can. But I don't know. It's a hard one.
Yeah, it is. And I think there's part of it is necessary because, it's one of those things where you journal. I love this. One of the things that I love about your book is that you have all these chapters on journaling that you call like fuckity, fuck it, fuck. What do you call them?
I was talking to a bunch of people before I started writing the book, and just a bunch of divorced people trying to kind of find a through line of experience and emotion, and really just putting off the actual writing of the book. But I had like hours long conversations with these people, and I kept saying to them, I haven't started writing this book yet because I need to get in the right headspace so I don't write every chapter with the title, fuck you, you fucking fuck. And everybody would like crack up and say, well, I would read that book though. And then I was thinking, well, maybe that should be in the book. And I think, rage is an important part of the process too, like getting that out. And so in the book, there's several different chapters, like rage journaling chapters. There's a lot of zen throughout the book. And then we just sort of lean in to the petty and the rage in the fuck you, you fucking fuck chapters.
I love them. They're scattered throughout the book. They're all called fuck you, you fucking fuck. But my point about that is that the blame game is important. Like it is in that, like, fuck you, you fucking fuck, until you get sick and tired of yourself. Yeah.
Because it's one of those things like, okay, so they did all this stuff. Well, like you can't change that. You can't change them. That's one of the big things I've worked on in therapy. So many things in therapy, but one of the big things is just this radical acceptance of who that person is. And especially if you have the co-parent with them, you'd have to just accept. Not in every case, obviously. There's abuse. There's
a lot of my
narcissism. There's definitely, it's not every case where you're just like, oh, okay. Yeah, you're just abusive narcissist, so just accept that. But
also you can't change them. Like a narcissist actually legitimately can't change, right? So an abuser has no interest in changing. So you actually do have to lean into this radical acceptance so that you can protect yourself. Yeah. Because if you're continually trying to like get them to change, then all of your focus is on this other person when it could be on yourself.
Yeah, like you said, at a certain point, it gets really exhausting and boring.
Right.
It's like, okay, you're no longer with this person. So that's what you did. You removed yourself from being with them.
And so when you get to the end of the like, fuck you, you fucking fuck, and you've sort of gotten to the end, the bottom of the well here, then you start to go, okay, so what about me? Right. And that's, I think, the most important part, because which is why I think the blame game is important, to go through that. It's journaling all of your resentments so that you can then flip it on your, okay, how was I responsible? Or what red flags did I miss? Or how did I show up in this? Because that's how we don't do this again.
You have to find a lesson, right? Like there has to be a lesson. And I think the only lessons can come from what did I do and how can I do better next time, for myself, for the other person, some cases it's like I went into mine there was a ton of reasons why I shouldn't have gone into the relationship I went into. But, it was time to get married. It was time to have kids. And I'm like, let's do this thing. We look good on paper.
Right. Right.
And, that's not fair to her. It wasn't fair to me or her. And, it blew up. And that was probably not a surprise to anybody. But so I think at that point, when you get past that rage and that blame, then that's when therapy can be really valuable, because you're finally willing and ready to go, okay, I need to be better. How do I be better? And that person is that person, and whatever, and heal from what they may have done to you or whatever, but also heal from what you allowed to happen and just do better, be better.
Yeah. I love you talk about, I'm going to keep going back with the stages, but I want to say that I love one part you talk about in the book about therapy and how you just, all of this money that you were wasting on therapy of trying to just like get sort of agreement about what a shit your ex was. And you were like, this is a waste of $175 a week. This is ridiculous. I have friends I could do that with. Right. And it wasn't until you were willing to stop complaining and start digging and like turn the focus back on yourself that you were like, okay, now it's time to go back to therapy.
Yeah. I wrote a chapter about therapy and like all the different times when you can do therapy. It was funny because it's like towards the end, we went to couples therapy, and basically you just treat the therapist as a judge. You're hoping You're both just going in there like pleading your case, hoping that the therapist be like, yes, you're 100% right. And this person's an asshole. Here we go. Like, I'll write it down on a piece of paper. And you're never going to get anything out of therapy if that's where you're at. And I was like, yeah, this is a waste of money. And then I had a similar strategy kind of at the end of things. And I was doing the same thing where I was just looking for validation that I was right and they were wrong. And I'm like, this again, I don't see a lot about, I knew what I was doing. And I was aware enough to know what I was doing and that it didn't feel good to just sit and bitch about someone for an hour and to pay for it. I had a relationship, a really brief relationship, but there were things that happened in that relationship and the way I acted and the way I was and the way I wasn't able to be and all these different things that I was like, oh, I got to get better. I need to work on myself. And there's a ton of stuff I haven't processed, not even just having to do with my ex, just how I even got into that relationship to begin with. What are the roots of all this stuff?
Exactly.
And it's never that person, right? It's always so much deeper than that. And I was like, I just am ready. I'm ready to like actually get better. And I think it's exciting for a therapist when they hear that because they're like, oh, let's go. You know,
all right,
like,
good. Let's dig in. Exactly.
Instead of just sitting there the whole time going, oh, that must have been so hard for you. That must have been so hard for you. You know, like, no, give me some tools. Tell me what I can do to be better. What can I read? How can I, I don't know, heal?
Yeah. So true. So true. And you have to be ready, right? Like a therapist can't make you ready. You can't make yourself, you got to be there. All right. So let's back to the stages, the 7 stages. We have the next one we have is Netflix and cry.
Yeah, I did. And also these stages are not necessarily linear. There's sometimes
they're never
and there's not like once you don't like finish and get some sort of graduating degree from that stage and never re-enter that stage again.
Right.
Sometimes 3 or 4 of these stages can happen all within about 12 hours. So like it's a crazy time. You're all over the place. Yeah. The Netflix and cry is sort of the beginning of, I think it's sort of the beginning, right? Because it's like, it's when you're really like, oh, this is real and this is happening and this is sad. Even if you're the one that ended it, it's still, you blew up a life, you know? And like I said, losing my kids was really, really hard for me. I didn't lose them. I had them 50% of the time, but I was and it was during the pandemic. So I had been home with them literally 24 hours a day. Right. It was a lot. And so there was a lot of just sort of turning on Netflix, watching depressing documentaries, like not even uplifting shows. I was just like, can I find the saddest documentaries ever produced? Just so I can just cry and there be a reason, right? Like, this is the saddest thing I've ever watched. Yeah. And just order takeout and just lean into it. But for me, important. I was so numb for so long leading up to my divorce, and that the unnumbing of me was quite a process. Yeah. And part of that was just like actually leaning into sadness and allowing it instead of pushing it down the way I had for so many years,
Right. Yeah. Right. All the leading up to it. For sure.
Yeah. I didn't realize how numb I was until I started coming back to life.
Totally. And right. It's like when the nerves start to like tingle and like shoot and you're like, oh, hello.
And it was, I don't think I handled it very well because I was so numb for so long that like things coming back online, I was so overwhelmed by it. I just, like it wasn't a comfortable state for me. It felt chaotic and untethered. And I think everybody around me got hit with that. And I feel really bad because I didn't have the tools to manage that or navigate that in a way that I should have, that an adult should have. So it's one of my biggest regrets. I wish I would have gotten into therapy earlier but at the time I don't know.
I mean, I kind of want to normalize that as a coach, right? Not that you asked me for coaching, but I think it's important to normalize that because emotions are messy. and when you've been suppressing them for so long and everything's coming back online, you're extra sensitive. Those nerve endings are like just being activated again, and you touch them and they freak the fuck out. Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's perfectly normal. And I think it's important to know that, right? Which is why we're not really ready to be in a relationship yet, which is why, right? We're really not quite there yet. But also sometimes that having that experience is part of the process.
I think it really messed up my relationship with my ex at the beginning of the end. But then I look back at that too, and I think our boundary, there was no boundaries. It was during the pandemic. The pandemic was just amazing anyway. But, we had the kids home 24/7. So even when I moved out, I was still back in the house every day teaching homeschool. And we owned a bunch of properties together. We still had joint bank accounts. She had a key to my house. Like it was not separate. And when I finally blew up and just was like, oh, I'm done, I made it separate in a very ugly way. And I think it was just my way of setting a boundary. But I see that now, right? I see now from like a logical standpoint, I was trying to set a boundary, but the way I was doing it was like, let's just drop a bomb in the middle of this thing and that's not fair. I mean, it is what it is, but it was hurtful, in a way that probably wasn't necessary. But then at the same time, I think maybe we did need that,
That's sort of, I feel the same way because I did something similar and I look back on it and I'm like, gosh, I regret it. And then I say, you know what? I don't know that we could have severed what needed to be severed without the nuclear option. Like it kind of what we needed, and it sucked, but I also think it provided that's the space that was very, very desperately needed.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end where we landed is okay. It just took me a long time, I think, to regain trust that my ex repartnered up real quick. And so that person came on the scene and all they knew of me was this psychotic nuclear person. Right. So it took her a long time, and I'm not sure if she even believes it yet, that's not me, that was like, it was. So I think she's kind of always like waiting for me to go. And I'm like, no, and I mean, it was me. You have to take ownership of like, yes, that was me. My therapist would give me the excuse of, oh no, it wasn't you. It was and I'm like, well, no, like if I went out and shot someone, I couldn't be like, oh, Your Honor, sorry, that wasn't
me.
That wasn't really me. Like, no, I did
right.
it. I have to take responsibility for it. But I do think there needs to be some grace and like, this is a very tumultuous time.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So yeah, I regret it. But like you said, I think that ultimately it's what had to happen. I just regret that it was as ugly as it got.
One of the questions I get asked a lot in my Facebook group, my programs, on Instagram is, what do I do with my engagement ring, my wedding ring? I've got all of these beautiful diamonds. I don't know what to do with them. Well, today's sponsor, Worthy, can help you get the most money possible for your jewelry, fast and risk-free. When you partner with Worthy, they do all the work for you, and their competitive auctions get you up to 3 times what a local jeweler would offer in as little as 2 weeks. The best part about Worthy is that you are in charge of what happens to your jewelry. You set the reserve price, you approve the winning bid, and then you get paid. And if your item doesn't sell for the price that you want, Worthy sends it back to you at no cost, fully insured. And now you can visit worthy.com/DSG and get an extra $100 when your jewelry sells for over $1,500. That's worthy.com/DSG. Worthy, a better way to cash in on that hidden asset in your jewelry box. Worthy.com/DSG.
Okay, so the next stage, but in the nonlinear, all the therapy. So I think we've sort of covered that.
Yes, do all of it.
And then Yeah, do all the therapy. Do all the therapy.
So much
and
of
then
it.
there's the hoe phase.
Oh yes, this is a good one.
You start this by saying, sure, therapy is great. Leaning into the healing is going to serve us very well in the future. But all that is long-term shit. In the meantime, let's have a little fun.
I think this is a really important phase. Like I've recently even set up several friends on different dating apps. Guys, I'm taking pictures of them and stuff because these boys have no photos. I'm just like,
they're the worst. They all do them from below, first of all. Like, come on, guys.
And they don't smile. I'm like, you look like a serial killer. What are you doing?
Jesus.
You don't look sexy. You look like a serial killer. Come on. Like these women. So I like put it on portrait mode. I'm like, look over there and smile and then help them like write this stuff. And then they they get so, I don't know. And girls do this too, where I don't know about going on the date, about just go on the dates. It's not, this person's not going to be your next spouse. I guarantee it. Just go have fun. Like, I think it's really important especially after, a divorce that kind of takes a long time to die, a slow dance to death. Like it's nice to just go feel good, you know, and not necessarily be a hoe, but even just like go and just have a nice conversation with someone that isn't weighted down by like decades of bullshit and isn't weighted down by like mediation and, custody agreements and all this. Is like, just go have fun. And if that means, making out with a stranger too, then that can happen too. Like, I think that's fun too. Like just seeing someone be excited to see you and like, I don't know, discovering new bodies and having them discover your body and that kind of stuff. Like it's just fun. And I think we still get wrapped up in this like purity culture thing, I'm like in my 40s.
As long as you're safe, go out and have some fucking fun. And especially, for, as I am now in my 50s, which is just fucking gross. But let me tell you, like I have almost zero desire at this point. So if you're in your 40s and like you're in your, especially for women in your sexual prime, like seriously get on that, like have a great time. Cause pretty soon you're going to be like, ew.
And like,
that's me.
It was so much fun to date in my 40s as opposed to your 20s. Like it's two adults who just like, I don't know, there's more confidence and there's what you like, like it, I don't know. It just, and maybe you don't know what you like. Maybe someone can teach you new things.
That's right. It's super fun. It's super
fun. And it's silly and it's stupid. And I love when my friends who are recently single tell me about, oh, you'll never guess what I did. And I'm like, that's fantastic. And it just makes them feel good. And you don't have to do it. There's other ways to feel good. You don't have to wrap it up in some sort of like dating adventure. You can go, work out, go on hikes, go move your body. That's not just that, but there's something really fun about just meaningless connections, when everything else feels so heavy, everything else is just heavy. Like, go have fun. Go fuck around a little bit. I don't know.
Seriously. Absolutely. Absolutely. Whatever that looks like to you and whatever feels safe or comfortable to you.
Yes.
But it absolutely 100%. Okay. So the final stage is the shrug.
Yes. I always say that the opposite of love isn't hate. The opposite of love is indifference. And I think because love and hate are very close to each other and they both involve a lot of emotion. So your ex is going to incite these feelings in you, these triggers in you for a really long time. And you'll know when you finally are kind of at the end or sort of over the hump and on the other side, when they do their same bullshit that they've been doing decades. And instead of getting enraged, you're like, you just kind of do a shrug.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Oh, look, there he goes again.
Right. And like
I'm still not there. I just have to say, I do still get enraged every once in a while. And it's been, a good 14 years, but I still every once in a while.
When there's kids involved, it's really hard to shrug off stuff. And sometimes you can't, and you shouldn't shrug off stuff if it has to do with your kids. And then you also get into like, I did this a lot where I was like, didn't I leave and blow up my whole life to get away from this bullshit? And I'm still having to deal with this bullshit. Like that was a big thing where you're just like, wait, hold up. I thought I was getting away from all this. And then, oh, here this person is still in my face for the next 10 years. It's like, oh, geez. Yeah. So you just have to hopefully eventually get to that point where there's just sort of a shrug when that bullshit comes up. And it's not always going to be. Right. But I've gotten to where, and I think my ex has too, we've gotten lean deep into like pick our battles.
That's right.
You know, and there's some things I do dig my heels in on, but I try not to make it every single thing because it's like, it's exhausting.
Yeah. Well, what I always say about that is that like, then why get divorced? If you're going to get divorced, you have to divorce yourself from the dynamic that got you divorced in the first place. And so if you're going to continue to perpetuate that dynamic well into your divorce, why bother?
Yeah. Yeah. I always say it's like when I got divorced, it was, and even in the process leading up to it is I gave up on us. And I was no longer participating. I was no longer at the table participating in things. I was just done. Like I mentioned, a little bit vacant. One of the biggest lessons of my divorce is, I can't be done with this person. That sucks. Yep. And she can't be done with me. And so we have to come back to this table and we have to figure out new ways of doing stuff. And we have to redefine how we are for each other and to each other and for our kids. It was actually her fiance. We were sitting at a table one time and my ex just said, you know, she just always say this, we just speak different languages. It's just like a throwaway. And we literally do. Like, I mean, I'm like, no, that's not what I said. You know, how did you not, how am I hearing? Like, it's like speaking to, but her ex or her fiance said, yeah, but people learn new languages all the time. So like, that's not an excuse. So like, do better. And I was like, oh, that's what we have to do. We have to figure out how to talk to each other instead of around each other and over each other, which is what we've been doing for, you know, a decade and a half.
I love that she said that. That's so great.
Yeah. I think she's like so exhausted being in the middle of us because she has to hear, you know, just like,
because she came on board really early.
Yeah. And that's a lot. But that's what we had to do. Like we had to come back. I have to know how she hears things. I have to, you know, I have to communicate with her in a way that I know she's going to hear me and I have to give her a certain amount of time to process. I have to, and then she has to give me certain things so that we can make sure that we're doing this project together. We both adore our kids and we want to do what's best for them. And so, you know, it has helped that time has passed. And so the initial anger and all the stuff that comes with blowing up a life has, you know, settled down. We're both so happy and that helps a lot, but it also is us both taking taking a breath and not immediately responding to texts. Every once in a while I see when she goes to respond and I see the ...
Right.
And then it stops. And then it stops and she goes, okay. And I'm like, oh, look at us. Yeah. This is progress. And I do the same thing where I'm like, delete and don't send because you can't do it. Like that's a huge thing too. Don't answer the text. Don't go crazy over email or text. It just doesn't. A woman told me recently, she was like, you know what I'm going to do? Someone recommended, and I don't know what your thought is on this. Someone recommended that I write a letter to my ex telling him everything that is in my heart and then give it to him. And I was like,
no.
And I said, no,
you burn that.
And I have a chapter in my book that is called The Story. And I think that was a big thing for me. It was like, her story was so different than my story. And I was just like, I felt crazy because I was like, that's not what happened. But I'm like, it just is what it is. Like people have different versions of stories. Yes. Eyewitnesses to crime see different things. And so like every story is colored by, you know, everything. Yeah. So I told her, I said, yes, write that down, write it all down, get it all out. And then, like you said, burn it. Like just let it go.
Give it to them. So what you're trying to do, and I understand sort of the impulse, right? Which is that you want them to understand your narrative and your story, as you said. And one of the hardest things to comprehend and to really like assimilate into your psyche is that you're going to walk away from this with different narratives.
Yeah.
And that you have no control over what their narrative is. And all you can do is have your own, right? Write it down, own it, own the shit out of your narrative.
Yeah.
But also know that they're over there owning the shit out of their narrative. And you can tell everyone in the world what your narrative is. And they're going to be equally telling everyone in the world what their narrative is. And you literally can't stop it. You literally can't. And so, you know, it's hard. It's a hard pill to swallow.
That was probably the most difficult thing for me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really hard. And when you sort of accept that, and so when you're trying to write that letter, right, and you want to give it to them, what you're trying to do is control their narrative, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's not going to do anything. It's just not.
And you're once again, and you know what's interesting in my case, you know, my ex partnered up really quick. I think in that case, her narrative gets reinforced because she's telling it to someone, right? And that person, and so now two people believe this narrative, and I'm trying to co-parent with two people who believe a narrative that isn't quite true, but also it's colored by the fact that I went insane at the very beginning, right? So like,
right,
you know, it's a little valid.
But you went insane also because of that new partner coming in like super quickly, right? You were triggered. Like, of course you were. But,
you know, it was not my greatest moment.
No,
but
I get it.
I eventually had to let go of the fact that, you know, every conversation we had, it was like bringing up the past, and the past was colored in different ways. And then I was just like, so it would be this argument and this like me trying to make my case. And eventually I'm just like, whatever.
Whatever.
But I did. So that was probably about a year of whatever.
Mm-hmm.
When I finally just like, okay, sounds good. And I got calm. And within the last 6 months or so, my ex, and this might be one of the benefits of being divorced from a woman, is that she's called me up a couple times and been like, so I think that maybe I had something to do with our relationship not working too. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, and that's what I used to always say was never, my defense was never that you were awful and I was perfect. My defense was always like, it was a relationship. Like there was no bad guy. It was nuanced. Like things ebb and flow. Like we both contributed to something that just didn't work and we don't work together. And that's okay. Like there doesn't need to be a bad guy.
Right.
And that was kind of what I always said. But I think for her healing, there needed to be a certain storyline. And I just like, whatever. And then she kind of got to it, I think, on her own.
Well, because she's in a new relationship and probably is having some of the similar issues come right back up. And she's like, oh, wait a minute.
maybe like when you get a little distance from something and you're no longer in that sort of fight or flight, you're no longer in that like stance of protective and like defensive and you're wrong and I'm right.
Right.
And you kind of just get into life, then maybe that gives you the chance to be like, oh, yeah, maybe it wasn't all the other person's fault. Yeah. Maybe just reality gets a chance to seep in. I don't think that's going to be the case for everyone.
No,
I don't think most people are going to have their ex randomly call up and be like, so I'm sorry about that thing I did. You know, like it's not going to happen, but you can't need that. And I didn't need it. So it was interesting that when it happened, I had moved so far beyond me. I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry too. We both contributed to this thing that didn't work. And I hope that we can do better for our kids now.
That's right. And that's the most important part. So we sort of touched on this a little bit, but do you feel like there are different dynamics with parenting and relationships and divorce coming from the perspective of LGBTQ plus couples?
Well, like I said to you before we started chatting, I've never been straight divorced. So I can't speak to that. I think, and this might sound sort of, I mean, there's a lot of women involved.
For better or worse.
I think both, you know, my kids have 3 moms right now. If I ever remarry, my kids will have 4 moms. I need you to send lots of thoughts and prayers for my son. It's just like, there's so many women, and God bless him, he is the sweetest boy. He is very well versed in women. It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot. I don't know if the fact that it's two women divorcing increases the emotion. I mean, I imagine everybody's super emotional during divorce. And everybody's different, right? Some people are more logical, some people are more emotional. I think in the actual divorce and the very beginning with my ex and me, and then her new partner, that's a lot of women.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one of my friends, she has an ex-husband and then a new husband. And I'm trying to explain the dynamics of three women. And she's got two men that are both super laid back guys. And so she just kind of runs the show. And that's not how every man is. But her men are like, they're pretty laid back guys. And so my ex and I are both very good moms, and we're both very invested in being good moms and showing up for our kids. And that's a good thing for our kids, but it can, especially at the beginning, be very difficult for, trying to figure out how to split up time and trying to be fair and just trying to hold everything together when you're with the kids and not be overly emotional and everything. But I don't think, men have emotions too.
Sure. Yeah.
But
right.
I will say, I think that co-parenting with three women or two other women, I think that has been really amazing. That I recently had to show up for a family member, and I needed my ex to help me out, and watch the kids. And without hesitation, she did it. And then she got sick while I was gone, and her fiance picked up the slack and took care of the kids and got them to a recital and this and that and did it. And
it's great. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. It's three moms, like
three moms getting shit done.
Yeah. Like three women can handle business, and again, I don't think that's to say that dads can't. There's some people that have, not great experiences with their ex-husbands, and some people that have awesome experiences with their ex-husbands.
Right.
And
it's just a people thing, not necessarily a gay or straight thing.
Yeah.
Right?
But, they're also, in our relationship, we had a delegation of tasks. And I think that happens in any relationship, and not necessarily like my job was a little more flexible. So I did a lot more of the kids stuff. I was just able to, do a lot more moving the kids around, and I'm just more of a scheduler. So I did a lot of the scheduling the kids stuff. And she did a lot of the outside, like me and my freaking sprinklers. After she moved out, I'm just trying to figure out my damn drip system.
Right.
And just, it's, stereotypical dude stuff. And I can do all of it. I just really don't want to. And so, I learned how to do a lot of it, but then also just found some dudes, and they, a handyman. And I heard you talking about that on one of your episodes of don't call it guy stuff, because women can do anything they want to. Yeah. And I totally agree with that. But I also think that there needs to be some recognition that you cannot do every single thing, or you're going to drown. This, I am woman, hear me roar. I am woman, I'm going to outsource this shit.
That's right. And you have a chapter on this in the book, which I love, which is you have categories, and then you have I got this, or I can YouTube this, or delegate
outsource it. Yeah.
Or outsource it, right? You don't have to do it all. Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest gifts of getting older is not having to prove to anyone that I can do every single thing. And being a mom is so overwhelming. And especially in the early years, you do want to do all the things, and then you're just drowning. And one of the things that you're not doing is taking care of yourself. And so I've got a handyman that I adore. And so when I just let stuff kind of pile up, and he'll come and do stuff, and I have paid someone to put my lights up on my house, because my ass is not getting up on my roof and putting lights up on my Christmas lights on my house. It's not happening. No. But I figured out my sprinklers,
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, I did. There's a lot of cussing, but there's stuff I can do or whatever. But I think that's part of it too, is in any couple, when you split up, there's a delegation of tasks that can feel overwhelming when they all become your tasks. Yes, and there's probably always a parent that does more stuff with the kids. And it's just my ex was super involved and has always been super involved with the kids, but I was kind of tasked with the home stuff. So when we split up, I know it was really overwhelming for her because she wasn't used to running a home.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. And for me, it wasn't as overwhelming because I was used to running a home. And one of those things I was running was a partner that maybe needed a little bit of assistance. So I was kind of like, I don't have my kids 50% of the time. I've got no partner. Like my house is spotless. This is awesome.
Yeah.
But I don't know. What was your experience co-parenting with a man in the beginning?
I will say that there was a lot of stuff. First of all, I had been a stay-at-home mom for a while. So there was stuff that was actually my job that he was like, I don't know how to do this. My response to him usually was like, you're really smart and I'm sure you can figure this out. Because I didn't want to continue to do the shit that he was going to have to figure out. Right. And the best way for me to do that was to be really kind, but to also take my hands off and not like jump in and do it all for him. But I also have, it was really funny. We were having a conversation about this the other day. And I said something about like the mental load and unpaid labor in the house. We were talking about my son, and I was saying to my son, like, I need to raise you to be able to, do these things and be proficient at them because, someday you're going to be in a relationship. He's straight. So you're going to be in a relationship with a woman. And I don't want you to be, one of those dudes who's just like, doesn't know how to, it's like weaponized incompetence and all. And my ex was like, what are you talking about? Why is it a feminist issue? I don't understand what you're talking about. Cause I said something like, I'm about to get on my feminist soapbox. And I said, that's because you're a unicorn. Because my ex, for all the issues that we had, he would come home from a full day of work and like immediately start like cooking or doing dishes or like giving our son a bath. Like he was always an equal partner in the house. And I will tell you, that is so unusual.
Yeah.
Especially for like a straight white man and especially for the person who was the breadwinner.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, you talking about dudes who just like come home, put their feet up on the couch and like crack a beer? I was like, yeah. And he was like, oh yeah, gross.
Yeah. Well, that's great that your son is seeing that modeled.
I think my experience was different than a lot of people, but I mean, it's really interesting because I do have a lot of people that will say to me like, yeah, your content feels really heteronormative. And I'm like, okay, but I am a straight woman and I do, and I'm starting to like my book is, I say partner and they, because I want it to be a little bit, I do want it to be less heteronormative. And I don't know I don't know how much is different. I have a lot of people who follow me who get a lot of, and I have clients who are lesbians and they get as much out of my content as straight people. I just like, I don't know what the differences really are. Again, because I've actually never been a lesbian, so I don't know.
And I've never been straight divorced.
Right, right. So like, I don't know.
I remember I went out with I've dated a lot, and I've dated a lot of women who are just recently decided, oh, maybe I'll go out with women. Glennon Doyle has convinced all these straight women that perhaps they need to touch a boob. It's an epidemic. So
it is, but also listen, I get it. Like if I could, I would. Yeah. It's not a choice. I'm desperate to not be straight, but here we are.
Yeah.
So I understand.
I went out with a woman that was like, I have so many questions. And I'm like, oh, okay, what questions do you have? But it was just like, who opens the door? And I'm like, I don't know. Whoever's closest to the door, who pays for dinner? Maybe you go 50-50, whoever picks it up. And I think.
Right. It's the chivalry thing that's not there.
It's that people need to have roles. And so they very much get confused when there's not a man, because then who does the man stuff? Right. But I think with women, there's definitely, female relationships where there is one who is, definitely takes on a more masculine role or whatever. But I think the fun of two women is that there's still a sharing of responsibilities, but there's no assumption of
Right.
going to do that.
Uh-huh.
And wouldn't that be beautiful if that's how it was in every relationship? And I think we're getting closer to that, where it's not just
our
like
kids are getting there.
Yeah.
Our kids, I mean, I see that with my son and his girlfriend and all of his friends. Like, I think we're getting closer. It is true. Certainly on the in the more liberal zones. But
yeah, it's just like, because it seems so crazy to think that there's only, one person in a relationship can do a certain thing.
right.
But I do think it happens in every relationship. You just kind of split stuff up. And there are certain tasks that one person maybe does better or just kind of takes over doing. But I do think with two women, maybe it's not written in stone or it's not assumed.
Right. Yeah.
And
sure.
I always felt so lucky to have a female partner when I had the babies, because she was she knew what she was doing. And, she was raised around a bunch. I had no idea what to do with babies. I had never I'd held a baby, but I had both of the kids, and I breastfed, which was, I think, so beneficial, because it forced me actually all right, hi, how are you? I guess we got to get to know each other. But every time the baby would cry in the beginning, I just handed off to her, and she knew what to do with the baby, and she would swaddle. And then she was so good with the kids. And even though I was breastfeeding, she would get up when they cried and get their diaper changed and everything. And I would sit down and she'd hand them to me, and it was always 50-50. It was never, I know women who'd be breastfeeding and just staring at their husbands while they slept, and just
oh my God,
I hate you.
But so it's really interesting, because my ex was the same. I mean, but he was the burper. He was brilliant.
Yeah.
So as soon as I was done, he would take him. But we also had really severe colic. My son had severe colic. So it was all hands on deck 24/7.
Yeah.
It was there was no way that he could have. I mean, I suppose there are men who do, but yeah, he was again, he's a unicorn. He was so right there and involved from start to finish.
But I do think a lot of that is it's, some of them just don't want to, but I think some of them, like me, they're just scared they're going to break the baby.
Yeah.
And so you have to just do it. And a lot of times men come on board when the babies get a little less breakable. And even 6 months where they're just they're actually their head is
smiling.
And it's not that they don't want to mess it up. And so they're just you know what you're doing, you're doing it better. And,
yeah.
But she was always, we were very good. We were always very good at co-parenting and sharing the load and all that kind of stuff. And so I think that's sort of translated into our co-parenting post-divorce. Is we're both very fair people, and we both adore our kids and know that our kids adore us. And so it's important that, we both be a part of their lives and we both make them the priority. So, it's nice to have gotten to that place where that's our focus, we can coexist without there being hostility and all that. So that's what's best for the kids. It just took 100%. A while to get there. And I think that's something, you have this idea of what you're going to be, and it's all going to be, sunshine and roses and poppy fields, but that doesn't necessarily happen. I sort of had expectations for myself at the beginning that I didn't meet. And I was really disappointed in myself for the way that I kind of exploded and my emotions took over. That's just not me, right? I hold it together. I'm a very even-keeled person, and that's sort of my thing. And so I spun off my axis, and I was really disappointed in myself for that. I've sort of forgiven myself a little bit, but we've righted the ship, and you have to have some grace during that time to know that it's not all going to be picture perfect. You're not just going to land at these situations where. No,
I think it's important that you take the time, right? You can have a goal, and that's great, but there's a process to getting there.
Like you said, you do your holidays and stuff together, but you're but we're a long time out from our divorce. We had these dreams of being this family, the co-parenting family, high fives and holidays together. And then I think we tried to do that the first year, and it was just awful.
It's always don't do it the first year. I say it all the time. Everyone does it anyway, but just you'll learn yourself.
It was an absolute disaster. And then it makes it so you don't want to try again,
Yeah. Give it some time. Dawn, thank you so much. I'm so excited about this book. When is it going to be released? Where can people find it? Can they pre-order it?
The book's coming out in January. the beginning of January.
Awesome.
So it'll be available wherever you find books.
wherever that might be.
Yes.
And this is The Shit No One Tells You About Divorce. And it's really, you guys, it's a really fun read. It's really, it's funny. Dawn's writing style is hilarious. And I think it's a really great book, and I highly recommend it.
Well, thank
highly,
you.
highly.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thanks so much for coming on, Dawn.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. If you like what you hear, head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in and leave me a review. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at the Divorce Survival Guide. I'll see you next time, and until then, remember, you, my love, deserve to be happy.